Welcome to another broadcast of Truth Be Told, where we believe in experience becomes truth. I'm your host. Today we have award-winning author, public speaker, book publisher, and event producer Brad Olsen with us. We are going to touch on quite a few subjects, such as what is a secret government and what are their primary motives? What happened to the Third Reich after World War II? And one of the most popular subjects, who are the men in black? Well, we'll find out with Brad Olsen today as an award-winning author of 9 books. We're going to touch on modern esoteric and future esoteric. That's 2 of his books, and we have much more, so don't go anywhere. Right here on Truth Be Told, please welcome Brad Olsen.
I'll be in the green room watching the show from afar.
Well, I left him out of the intro, but that's okay. But I always love to see people's faces when we do play the canned applause, because they go from like very serious look to like, oh my God, what?
Hey, there's an audience. We like to imagine our audience actually applauding at home.
Hey, Brad, how you doing?
Hey, good guys. Thanks for having me on again.
Well, welcome back.
To finally be on with Captain Ron.
Yes, sir. I'm looking forward to this. You talk about a lot of the things that I'm very interested in, from ancient monuments to all this stuff. It's really good.
Well, we touched a lot on the stuff like Men in Black last time, and the Arctic Circle, and one thing that we really didn't touch on, and we can talk about your latest books, but I want to touch on Sacred Places of North America to start, because it's kind of the show we had before. We touched on some of the ancient sites around the world, but we've never really talked about ancient sites of North America.
Which is good, because actually people can go to those. I've never gone to Machu Picchu or Stonehenge or any of these farms.
Exactly.
But I could maybe get to something like this. This be good. Let's talk about North America.
So if you don't mind, let's talk about your book, Sacred Places of North America. 108 destinations. We don't have to go through all 108, because that might take
just the first 100.
Here's all 4 of them in the back of the Future Esoteric book.
Oh, there we go. Yes.
I'm getting it right here.
I can see it. And I'm gonna put.
We have it up on the.
Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't pull those books out. I thought we were just going with the esoterics. But yeah, that's basically how I got started, not only in these esoteric subjects, traveling around to a lot of these places, writing about them in the books, but finding that there's many mysteries, not only in the place that they're located and how they're built, many mysteries with megalithic ruins, of course. But when I was doing the Sacred Places books, often finding that, for example, in the mountain sites here in North America, that giants or skeletons wearing full suits of armor were pulled out of some of the mound sites, and the Great Pyramids having a much bigger story to tell than I could fit into the 3 or 4 page treatment in sacred places around the world. So that really led me to get into some of the subject matter that I wasn't able to cover in these books. And it just opened up so many doors. And of course, I'm very interested in UFOs and think this is the greatest mystery of our age. As I said at Contact in the Desert on a panel, these are pre-disclosure times, and this is the grand subject, as I call it. And to understand exopolitics, that is the ET's interaction here with us on Earth, is one of the most important things we could endeavor to learn about, because it's everything that the human race has the potential to become, as well as so many things. As you said in the setup, the secret government ties into it. All the technology that has been sequestered ties into it. Like the late William Cooper said, you put the aliens in the middle of this stuff and you get all the answers. And I'd have to say that it's also true with some of these sacred places as well.
What would you consider, quote, sacred place? What is a sacred place?
Well, a lot of them we know just as places that we would go visit. For example, if you were going to Agra, India, you'd go see the Taj Mahal in the Red Fort. There's no doubt about it. There's practically the only things that are in that city that would appeal to tourists. So a lot of these places are already UNESCO World Heritage Sites, or in the case of North America, national monuments, national parks. But some are still unpreserved. Some, such as the prehistoric stone chambers in New England, as I call them, and I have a DVD on the subject, are just on private land or unprotected and sometimes vandalized, or there's trash in there. I remember I was at the Upton Stone Chamber one time, and I'm pulling out beer cans and old tires and stuff. I'm like, these places are being desecrated right before our eyes. And a lot of people don't even realize their historic importance.
Now, let's talk about that, the prehistoric chambers. Talk about that. I don't know much about them.
Okay, well, there's hundreds of them all across the 5 or 6 states of New England and New York State. This one here is the largest, and this one is open as a tourist attraction. It's called America's Stonehenge, just north of the Massachusetts border, just outside of outer Boston in New Hampshire. And it has several stone chambers and like a central village, these megalithic stones, as well as a sighting point where it got the name American Stonehenge, where you can see the rising of the solstice, sunrise, and sunset from different megalithic stones that have been erected a long, long time ago to denote that. So there's really no denying that these people had an understanding of the movement of celestial bodies thousands of years ago, right here in North America. Now, the whole place has been poo-pooed as nothing more than Indian sweat lodges or colonial root cellars. But really, that makes no sense, because if you look at some of these chambers, they're too big of an opening to be a sweat lodge. Besides, Native Americans have always said we had nothing to do with them. All the tribes of the New England region said they were there long before we came by, and we just basically leave them alone. We think they're like haunted sites. And even that's true with most of the colonials, that they would say, well, we came to this land and there were already these chambers on the land. And okay, yeah, some of them utilized them as root cellars.
Right.
That's fine. You might as well. They're pretty clever people back then to utilize what they could use. But that doesn't explain how that all these non-masonry, often conical on the roof, like a beehive stone chamber,
right,
with megalithic capstones were created that nobody claims. And the only similar structures to these beehive stone chambers are in Europe, primarily in Ireland, Scotland, the Orkney Islands, and the Hebrides, these far northern islands of Great Britain. So it's believed that the same monks, these Chaldee monks who created these beehive chambers in Europe, came over the stepping stones, as it's called, all the land masses that you can catch, and then the Labrador Current takes you right down to New England. Same thing happened with the Vikings, that of course they came down as far south as New England. Why wouldn't they? That's where all the resources were.
What about that? I'm going blank, but in Oklahoma, wasn't there something?
Spiral mounds?
Yes.
Or the Heavener Runestone?
Yeah, Runestone.
Yep. I got that covered in Sacred Place North America. I went out there and visited it, both those sites. The Heavener Runestone's amazing, just in this beautiful Ozark mountain in the far west of the Ozarks, which is eastern Oklahoma. There it is, standing right in this forested valley. There had been several others that are lost.
Is that it?
But this one appears to just say Gloams Valley, or something to do with someone's private property, that they just wanted to have this demarked as their property. But so amazing that it's written in the Viking runestone alphabet.
So
what about the Kensington Runestone? Does that tie into that one, or is that completely
well,
separate?
it sure does. And the Kensington Runestone's up in Minnesota, also written in the runic text, and it too describes this one a voyage of some wayward Swedes and Goths, as the Norwegians were called back then. And for the longest time, it was called a hoax because, for one, they couldn't read it. But you see right there in the lower right, AVM,
right,
that part of the script actually authenticates it as something very original, very unique, and very authentic.
I was going to ask you, you think it is real?
AVM was what they used to call it a hoax. They said, hey, you can't have Latin text in there with the text. Well, it also has a date written on there too, the date of this journey, which ended in some kind of massacre where half of the crew was killed and the survivors went running. And it describes how they had to flee from their basically the camp that they made with their ocean going ships and flee for their lives when they found half of their crew dead. And the AVM stands for Ave Maria. And in the context of this runestone, it says, Ave Maria, save us from peril in the Viking text. And everybody thought, well, why would they be using that? Why would they be referring to Catholic? But in the year 1362, I believe that's the year, they were indeed newly Catholicized in Scandinavia. So it actually makes perfect sense that they would take a prayer like AVM, Ave Maria, and use it to help them get out of this predicament they were in.
And Brad, isn't there something with the text, like the hooked X and stuff, that makes it also seem authentic? Is that tie in?
Yeah, that's right. That's Scott Walter. He wrote a book on it. And the hook X is another thing that this dates from this period, but at the time it was found. And I should also say that it was discovered by an illiterate Norwegian farmer and his son, who is also illiterate. And they were the one, because sometimes the hoax story is far more ridiculous than just saying, well, what if? And for the longest time, this stone just ruined this guy's life. They would call him a charlatan, a hoax, and he didn't want anything to do with it. He was using it as a step to his barn for the longest time before somebody finally says, hey, let's take a second look at this. And then started to agree that indeed this was a record of a Viking incursion far into the
I hate that when they ridicule these guys, because I don't want to discourage people from coming forward when they find something like this,
Right.
I want that to come out and be exposed.
So why do we keep telling the history wrong? Why when we find stuff like this that is proven to predate, Columbus and other explorers, why do you think that we can't go back and erase what we've been teaching and say, okay, this is the fact of what we've found now? Why do you think society, and I mean, it could be tie into politics, it can tie into religion, can tie into whatever, but what is your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you just touched on it. It's probably all the above. And it's largely this concept of manifest destiny, that the white people were here to claim the land of the Native Americans, to have other prior claims, especially from European nations, may hinder in some of those property rights. Same thing goes out here on the West Coast where I'm at in San Francisco. There's a big debate about who discovered the San Francisco Bay. And there's a lot of great evidence that Sir Francis Drake was the first one here. He even left a plaque in Tiburon saying that we're claiming this land as New Albion. And that too has been thrown out the window, even though I tried to get Scott Walter in season 3 to come out here and do an episode on it and do his forensic archaeology, and maybe we could prove that the plaque is real. But it's the same thing, because if this was claimed here, the San Francisco Bay, for the British Crown, it would disrupt the whole property claim. Same thing goes with Scandinavia with the Kensington Runestone, or for that matter, the prehistoric stone chambers in New England perhaps really belong to Ireland. Damn. So I think history is basically, it's always written by the people who win the war, the victors, those who have an agenda to tell a story a certain way and to poo-poo evidence that may contradict that story.
Is this what buries all the giant stories and all those things?
Sorry, again, what
is this what buries all the giant stories and the alien stories and that kind of thing?
I think that would be one and the same, Captain Ron, because not only do you have some of these ancient giants that come out of the mounds of Ohio and the Mississippi River Valley, and actually all across the country, here in California too, down in the Catalina Islands. Some great finds, but they just get swept under the rug. Smithsonian Institute comes in and says, we'll take it from here, shows them their like little FBI badge, and You
Right.
never see those bones or artifacts ever again.
Hey, Brad, you just mentioned the Ohio. Are you talking about the Serpent Mound in Ohio?
Serpent Mound was found with some burials in it. And all around there, you have the Hopewell and the Adena cultures, which are covered in my book, Sacred Place in North America. And as I said in the setup, oftentimes many of these mounds, especially the burial mounds, there were also geometric mounds like in Newark, Ohio, and the effigy mounds, such as, right here, the Serpent Mound in Ohio, which also has all these astronomical alignments that can be traced off the curvature of this serpent, showing that this mound had multiple purposes, including also, like America's Stonehenge, predicting the seasons, which to prehistoric people was a very important bit of science that they had in their tool chest.
Amazing.
And we had psychic Mark Anthony on earlier, and he was talking about this subject too. And we always think, you know, when the white man came and they thought they were so primitive and just stupid and ignorant, but yet they were very advanced for what they had, and we trying to figure out how did they become so advanced with science and astrology. I mean, that fascinates me.
That's a good point. And of course, the Native Americans were actually highly regarded. They were called the noble savages because they had such an affinity with the planet. They knew how to live sustainably. They were actually very fair in warfare, much to their disadvantage because the white settlers weren't fair at all. They had guns and would just pick them off.
Right.
And they had a very intact culture here that's been all but destroyed in the last few hundred years. So it's really a shame. And when I was doing the Sacred Place North America book, I was really hoping I would give a shout out to many of the lost traditions, the locations for vision quests, which are all across the country and often in the most beautiful locations in the surrounding area. And these places really made a very strong effect on me. And I think if people traveled to these sites, they would have the same feeling.
Well, that's just what I was going to ask you. Where should Tony and I go? Give us a day trip. Give us seriously. What do you think was the most moving place to see in America?
Wow, so many. Let's see if you guys are down in LA. Have you ever been to the Blythe and Talios? They're right along the Colorado River there.
Yeah.
They're like our Nazca lines right here in California.
No kidding.
And there's also a few on the Arizona side. I'd go there if you've never been.
What's it called? Blythe?
Yeah, Blythe is the city. It's right on Arizona border of California, right? Yeah, it's right at the border
there
town.
in a half a day.
I think we should go.
Done.
I think we should go. Well, real quick before we move on, I want to show this picture of that shows the winter solstice, where it shows the winter solstice and spring and summer.
Yep.
Yeah. So how do you? I mean, in your thoughts and theories, how do you think they
figured that out? Do
you think it was extraterrestrial? Do you think it was just thousands of years of experience? I mean, what is your thoughts?
Well, first of all, it's too much to just be a coincidence that it would have these alignments.
Right.
Again, I think the Native Americans have really been given the short end of the stick as far as how advanced their culture really was. And you can see a lot of these astronomical alignments at a lot of their sites, including Cahokia in Illinois, just across from St. Louis, which has a round, they call it Woodhenge, much like a Stonehenge in Europe, which all the posts have been rotted away, but they still found the post holes and they know where the sightings were at. So I think the Native American people in prehistoric times were actually quite sophisticated and used this information, just like the medicine wheels on the Great Plains were also used to tell, there's Woodhenge, tell the changing seasons, when it might be time for the tribe to migrate and move out. And in fact, most of the medicine wheels are in Canada. And retracing these artifacts and monuments is called archaeoastronomy. And it's retracing when some of these alignments would have been in perfect alignment and actually dating it back. So in the case of the Bighorn medicine wheel, knowing that it's several thousand years old, because it's already slightly askew.
Right.
It doesn't quite line up today as it would have a couple thousand years ago.
It would have been perfect then. It's one thing to kind of know the seasons and we know when to move and know when to plant or whatever. To pick the solstice day and have it all line up exact, that's pretty amazing. And certainly when you're talking about 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, they knew this at least. That's incredible to me because it would take a long time to realize that, I would think.
Absolutely. And the fact that they knew that, as well as the brightest stars in the summer sky, which they aligned to, and only recently, largely due to Graham Hancock and his book Fingerprints of the Gods, do we know about the precession of the equinox, which is the moving sky. And it would take an entire person's lifetime to catch just the slightest change in the night sky. Over 70 years it takes before you can perceive it with the naked eye.
Right. The whole thing's what, 26,000 years, Brad? Is that how long it is?
Well, to just see a little bit, I think it goes every 29,000 years, all the way back and around. And that's where you get the signs of the zodiac. You get prominent stars in the sky right above head during each one of the zodiac seasons. But just to be able to pick that up, it must have taken many lifetimes, or someone who is very, very old, like over 100 years old, to say, well, when I was a teenager, actually those stars were slightly askew. They were over there. And so you date it backwards using archaeoastronomy, and you can tell pretty accurately when a lot of these monuments were built, and they're several thousand years old, almost all of them.
That's why they think the pyramids and maybe even the Sphinx was, 12, 13,000 years ago when that lined up with Leo, possibly.
That's right. And maybe it was based on Leo, and was the water markings on the side determine it to be 12, 15,000 years old, the oldest sculpted outdoor monument in the world.
I want to ask you this: in your latest book, Future Esoteric, you talked about modern science with ancient wisdom. And what we're talking about of a lot of the Vikings and the Native Americans and Egypt, what do we still use today that has made such an impact on our environment today, meaning our sciences and our wisdom and our technology? What do you think was the most impactful of these ancient sites or ancient civilizations?
Well, probably astronomy. Right there, as we've been talking about, because we can trace that back and know that they have had astronomy science for thousands of years here in North America and various tribes, and also alignments at various sites around the world. And only until the time of Galileo and Copernicus did we start to understand the cyclical nature of the planets revolving around the sun, to understand all this again. So it seems to me that this was a lost science that has just been rediscovered during the Renaissance.
Had to be, because we had the whole flat Earth thing. That's what they thought, right? Really? So how could they didn't even think of any of these things?
Still people think it's a flat Earth.
Right, Kyrie Irving, right?
Yeah. What do you think about the flat Earth?
I think it's a psyops. Notice how it just came up out of nowhere a couple years ago. Nobody was talking about that 5 years ago, and then all these real slick videos came out. And I got a few friends that have fallen for it.
I wonder if they were sitting around a table smoking a joint, going, "You know what? Let's try."
Come on, that's a tough one. That's so easily proven. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's so easily proven. If you've ever taken an airplane flight, you can see the curvature of the Earth out the window. I mean, come on, people.
Right.
Let's snap out of it here.
Well, I think astrology is fascinating because when a lot of people, they used to especially, think that it was all about crops. I'm not for sure, because we just got back from Roswell and we were at Contact when you were there, but I'm starting to wonder if I'm kind of doing a little switch into the extraterrestrial realm, because we got back from Roswell and I'm starting to see that astrology, has played a bigger part in our society, other than just crops. Do you feel that there may have been more to it than just crop? When to grow crops, when to store crops, What are your thoughts on that?
As far as being a part of the crop circle phenomenon?
Yeah, not really crop circles, but like the UFO.
I think he's asking about astrology. You're saying
astrology. Yeah, like.
Oh, sure. Well, of course. I mean, every farmer will tell you that they have to plant for the season, and if they don't know the calendar quite exactly, this is what threw a lot of not only ancient mariners off, but also people trying to understand the seasons to get their seeds in at the right time. Unless you really know when the solstice is, and this is a key date, because then the seasons start to turn, whatever crops you're growing are going to be before, during, or after. They're going to have something to do with how long the days are and how much sunlight those plants are going to get. Unless you know that exactly, you're going to have a failed crop. And let's face it, you may, in times of old, suffer the consequences and die of starvation if you don't get it right. So it's very important that they knew these things, and that's why we see them incorporated into so many different sacred places around the world.
Hey, Brett, let me first apologize for Tony heckling you at Contact in the Desert. I thought that was very unprofessional, and I just want to apologize.
I threw my popcorn once.
I really apologize. Now, worldwide, though, what do you think the monuments that you've seen, these sacred sites, what do you think the monuments are that really stand out, and why?
That's a great question, Captain Ron. I certainly think the older the monument, the more fascinating it is.
Agreed.
And oftentimes you'll find that they're built upon even older structures. One of the best examples you might know is Baalbek in Lebanon.
My favorite one.
Which has some of the largest hewn megalithic stones in the world, to the point where they don't even know how they moved some of these stones. They're so big. Even the biggest modern crane today would have a very difficult time getting them from the quarry up to the Baalbek site.
Brad, that alone, that's one of my favorite things to show people, because I always want to try to give people, the non-believers that don't buy into any of this stuff that we talk about. That's a perfect example. That is, to me, such a great, how could that possibly be done?
It was done, and one of my claims of fame when I was on the show Ancient Aliens, I was talking about auditive levitation, which I cover in my book, Future Esoteric, in so much that there was this doctor who came out from Sweden to help a High Lama. And I have his diagrams, his handwritten drawings about how he went to observe the Tibetans auditively levitate giant megalithic stones up a cliff face.
Wow.
And they did it with sound, a cacophony of sound. But I've also understood recently in the last year or so that they were also doing it with their consciousness, because they would create this semicircle around. There were horns, there were drums, and all the monks came out from all the monasteries to chant in this low rhythmic tone. And they were all looking down. And just at the moment the sound became the loudest cacophony it could be, all the heads looked up. And right at that moment, the rock lifted up and it levitated. This is according to this medical doctor who came out to Tibet, and they shared with him some of the stories. So if you know how to do it, and as I was talking about in Ancient Aliens at a site called Nan Madol in Micronesia, it's once again, it's how did they move these massive stones? And in the case of Nan Madol, there was a quarry site on the other side of the island. They had to take them over a water passage. These are megalithic stones, very, very heavy, several thousand pounds, some up to 30 tons each, to come from the quarry to then stack them up in a Lincoln log style fashion of some of these buildings there. In a way, the technology, this lost technology of auditive levitation, and may be the only logical explanation.
Well, there you go. Now, that would be the argument against extraterrestrial intervention to do this, that humans themselves could develop that technology that you just referred to and do them on their own, right?
I think that's not.
They could do that on their own, and it would also mean that they would have had a high technology culture, and that has since been lost because, of course, as we know today, we don't know how to do auditive levitation.
This is the big question, I think. It's either one of two things happened for the pyramids, for these giant Baalbek things. It's either that we had this high technology and humans developed it and lost that, or extraterrestrial intervention. I think that's the debate, I think, right?
Yeah, I would always say let's look at how the humans could have done it on their own first.
Right.
And wait until we introduce the aliens.
Right. Well, that was a good
Could
explanation.
have been a high-tech civilization that had influences or given technology from that the humans were using too.
That's a good way if they could do it with sound, which is often there's a lot of these old texts sometimes mention sound too.
Oh yeah, that's right. Remember Joshua in the town, what is it, near the Dead Sea, Jericho.
Mm-hmm.
They played their trumpets and the walls came down.
I do. Yeah,
so it is in the Bible, and they do talk about using auditive techniques to either build or take down structures. And it should also be pointed out that we know that every piece of matter has a certain frequency or resonance. And an example I use often is just think of a opera singer who's able to shatter a wine glass with her voice.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing being thrown at that glass to make it shatter. It's happening because she is matching the resonance of that glass and making it break. So that's the basic concept of auditive levitation, that if you can understand the frequency of that matter, in this case, a giant slab of rock, it can be lifted using the auditive frequencies that match that piece of matter.
Is one of your places in America Coral Castle in Florida?
Oh yeah, it sure is.
Now, do you think he used that same principle? Or?
I think he did. In fact, the only clue he would give is he knew the techniques of the ancient Egyptian builders, and he was using to employ that. This is a 100-pound, what we call a 100-pound weakling from an immigrant from the Baltic countries who came over here and worked alone at night and would quarry on his site and have those stones in place.
And then he moved the entire thing by himself.
He basically had another location and he had to move. And so he hired a long flatbed truck.
Right.
And they pulled up one day and they go, well, how are you going to move those rocks? And he goes, don't worry about it. They'll be loaded tomorrow morning. And sure enough, thousands of pounds of rocks were on that flatbed. They moved it to the...
Yep, there's a modern example, so somebody did it somehow.
I think we should try to recreate
that. Scalian.
I think we should. I wonder if anybody's ever tried just say, I want to recreate it and just see if I can do it and just to see the results. Because, it's such a beautiful artwork, too.
Yeah, it's the only modern megalithic site of the 20th century.
Wow.
Of using massive 1,000-pound blocks.
That's right here in America. See, people can go to Florida and see this. That's doable.
Yeah. Well, that's why I encourage people. Yeah. I give directions on all the sites in my Sacred Places book. I really want to encourage people to go and visit these places because oftentimes they'll speak to you. You just give them a chance to be quiet, meditate, just sit there and look at the places and think about it. And I've had incredible breakthroughs myself personally at these sites, and that's why I believe they're so important.
Now, vision or auditory, what did?
Just kind of a sense of well-being sometimes, or telling me a little bit about the place, or just seeing something and walking over there and checking it out and discovering something new, just that sort of thing. Just being open to the experience, I think, is half of the point of going to these sites.
Give us another good one in America we can go to.
Well, nearby, you guys, are you ready to
Ideally, sure. Yeah, we're ready.
Go for a little road trip.
Oh, we're ready for a road trip. Yeah.
We're ready for a road trip. Yeah. Well, if you're on your way out to the Coral Castle, be sure to stop at Chaco Canyon. That's one of my favorite places in the Southwest. It's amazing. And talk about a lost civilization with high technology. They have a road system that radiates out from Chaco Canyon like the spokes on a wheel. And these roads are as straight as a Roman road. They go over mesas. They go as straight lines. Yeah, and the largest diva in the world is right there, as you can see, where they did ceremonial practices. And some of those windows also opened up to the solstice. So they, too, had knowledge of the seasons and celestial movements. It's just an amazing place. And this actual structure you see right here is many stories tall. It's like in a modern apartment block, and would have housed many thousands of people. So Chaco Canyon was quite like the capital city to the ancient Anasazi people, but that term is no longer in favor. Now they're the ancient Puebloan, because it's somewhat of a derogatory term to call the Hopi Anasazi. It literally means ancient enemy to the Navajo, who basically came into that area. And the Navajo language is really interesting. It traces all the way up to the Yukon Territory, Native American tribes, and presumably across the Baltic Straits to Siberia. So we know that the language of the Navajo came from the far north of Canada, and they basically moved in on the Hopi territory and have long been rivals.
We got a road trip there.
I'm going to go.
Now, do they have a lot of petroglyphs there, or any?
Oh, tons. You see that petroglyph on the cover of Sacred Place in North America. I met a guy when I was in Old Arabi, which is the oldest and continuously inhabited town in North America, and he took a liking to me, and we actually hung out. And, he needed some money. I gave him $20 or something and took him out to lunch.
What's his
He's
name,
like,
Dean Ryan?
I'll show you something I don't normally let any white people see. And he showed me this petroglyph and let me photograph it. And so I put it on the cover of the book.
Awesome.
But yeah, they're all over the place. A lot of great petroglyphs and pictographs. The difference is pictographs are painted. Petroglyphs like this are etched into the stone. And many tell stories, not just hunting rituals that would have been performed, but you can see like a shaman with a shield there, which could be a sun shield. So many different things that can be gleaned from studying these magnificent portraits, which are covering the Southwest.
Well, another thing close to us in the Southwest is the Grand Canyon. Have you heard about how they say they found, Egyptian artifacts and that kind of stuff? Yeah. Right, Tony.
Yeah. In fact, when I first heard about it was from Scott Walter. On his show.
Yeah. I wish that show was still on. There's so many more episodes you could have done.
I loved it.
The first I heard of it was through David Hatcher Childress.
Yeah, me too. That's right.
Your show too. And he, in his book, The Lost Cities and Ancient Sites in North America, he had the newspaper article, full-page article in a Phoenix newspaper in the 1930s saying that this archaeologist had been in the Grand Canyon, had found all these Egyptian relics in man-made carved-out caves way high above that were very hard to get to. And I took a 2-week raft trip down the Grand Canyon back in 2003 and was asking my guide about this because it's such an amazing,
awesome
little piece of legend. And all he would tell me is, I've heard about it and I know where it is, but nobody is allowed to go back in that region.
Really?
Grand Canyon. Nope. And they have all the names like Osiris Mesa and Isis Tower and all these Egyptian names are ascribed
it's
to
like
it.
A tease.
Go back there.
It's like a tease. They're like, no, there's nothing back here.
There's
Osiris.
something there, man. There's something to that. There really is.
Well, because even
we gotta fly some drones around there. Maybe we'll find the entrance to that cave.
Yeah, I remember. I'm trying to think the Native American that I told him was 90 years old. I have to say real quick, we were in
Roswell.
at Roswell, and I interviewed.
I can tell this part.
Okay, you tell it.
Tony very politely walks up. We're trying to get people to come on our show,
so
and we had different guests, and we said, "Hey, why don't you come over and do our show?" And they're like, "Great." So this Indian guy's there, and we were like, "Hey, we were going to invite him on the show." And Tony says, "Hey, are you 95?" I'm like, "Oh my God, why did he just say that?" The guy looks at me and he goes, "Well, I'm 70. Why?" And Tony goes, "Well, I think you were on my show. I thought you."
Oh my God!
It turns out he was.
He was on my show. I got him confused with another Native American elder, and I remember I wanted to have this.
He was Zulu.
Yeah, I was hoping to have him.
Zuni.
Zuni, excuse me.
But I was hoping to have him on my show. I couldn't
Clifford Mahoney, right?
Yes, Clifford. But I was trying to get this other guy. I think the other guy did pass away, and for some reason I got those.
But Clifford's face was unbelievable when Tony said, "Aren't you like 95?" It's like,
I know
70?
Clifford real well. He's
Yeah.
got a great sense of humor.
He was great.
He'll hold it against you.
Yeah, he was great.
He was great. But anyway, I think he was the one that was on the Scott's show talking about the Egyptian artifacts found at the bottom. And like I said, it was even in the Smithsonian back, 1919, 1918, when they came in and pretty much closed it down. So, well, we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure everybody knows how to get your books and everything. But the Future Esoteric is your latest one. Is that correct?
Future Esoteric in the second edition came out last year, and just now at the printer, Modern Esoteric is going to be out in a second edition. I don't even have a copy yet, but it will be available very soon. And I'm working on the third and final installation called Beyond Esoteric, The Ultimate Journey. But I need another year and a half to go on that one.
Well, what's a Modern Esoteric? Give us a little sample of what's...
Well, and we should do a whole show on this. This is where the story begins. This is going back to antediluvian cultures, the mystery schools, and secret societies, many of which are actually thousands of years old, some dating all the way back to the pharaohs in Egypt.
Wow.
And there's a section called Lifeology in Modern Esoteric, and I call it some primitive wisdom subjects, esoteric traditions. This is really the nuts and bolts of what esoteric studies are all about in this book, because in Future Esoteric, I get mostly into the ET enigma. But it also goes to this modern age, and I talk about things like the control grid, and we don't have time now to go into the secret government and so forth. But
we love that stuff.
This information has been withheld from humanity. And since I'm an optimistic and happy person, I always like to end my books with positive, what we can do about it type chapters. And the final section is called Thrive, and it's how we can make ourselves stronger, healthier, wiser, and know these subjects and live better by knowing them.
And I love that, because not too many end on good notes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Brad, I mean, I could tell that you could come on anytime. You know about all this stuff. We barely scratched the surface of any of your stuff. I mean, this is fantastic. Right, Tony?
Oh, please. The invitation is always open for Brad. And
always open. Well, we'll just have to pick another date and do Modern Esoteric. And I got to send you guys some copies so you can read it.
Please do.
And also, we covered sacred places on this show, and that's great too. And I'm very passionate about this subject as well.
Well, it all really starts with the sacred sites anyway, because that's where most of us have learned about yourself, and a lot of the archaeologists.
Brad was actually a travel writer, right? Weren't you? Right, that's what he did. That's what I mean.
A travel writer.
That's
but that's what's funny.
I mean, I still take junkets and press trips here and there, and
awesome.
So that's what got most of us interested in the ancient sites, which led us into now the more modern conspiracy theory and secret societies and stuff like that. So. And I hope it does touch people out there to really get them involved, to look at the history, what really brought us into what's going on today, because it's very significant. So, all right. Well, Brad, thank you so much. Everybody go to bradolsen.com. You can check him out. He's an award-winning author and a great guy, and we really appreciate you being on Truth Be Told.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure, guys. And also go to CCC Publishing if you want to check out the books, and if you order one through the site, comes through my office, and I sign copies when they're my books going out the door.
Perfect. Cool. All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Truth Be Told, another episode. We really appreciate it. We hope you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check us out on iHeartRadio, iTunes, and all the other places you can find podcasts. And we'll see you next week right here on Truth Be Told. I'm Tony Sweet.
Captain Ron.
All right. Take care.